Hi everyone, Benanthony Wamptano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Uncommon NASA record, New York Telephone. Uncommon NASA is a New York-based rapper, producer, label head, and sound engineer. This dude has a deep history, was in the rap outfit The Presence in the late 90s, started Uncommon Records in the early 2000s, was the pretty much go-to sound engineer for Definitive Jux Records from 2000 to 2005. He has a number of collaborative albums under his belt with Watu and Willie Green, as well as Short Fuse, a number of solo records as well, whether it be under the name Uncommon NASA or his other pseudonym Adam Warlock. However, my personal first introduction to this guy's music was shortly after a fight I had with him over Twitter, over the, I think the last Raekwon album. we did not see eye to eye, and I had no clue who this guy was, and we were just having a pretty heated and lengthy discussion over whether or not this album was good or not that good. So as you can imagine, coming fresh off this very impassioned argument, impassioned on both sides, maybe I was not totally in the perfect mindset I could have been in to listen to this man's music. Especially after seeing in a few different places online that he has categorized himself and his label as dabbling in progressive rap. I did give Uncommon NASA's last full-length LP a try. It came out last year. It's titled The Land of the Way It Is. I was impressed by the Prince Poe feature on this LP, by a number of conceptual tracks on this project, but I thought some of the rapping and some of the production was just a little too rough around the edges to get excited about it. However, I have come to learn that this is a very intentional characteristic, and a characteristic that runs throughout this new Uncommon NASA LP too. NASA's vocals have a characteristically muddy feeling to either the way they're recorded or mixed, a feeling that doesn't really ring through on a lot of the guest verses here. And the instrumentals on this LP are absolutely cacophonous, just really clunky bass lines, heavy, punchy, just very muddy drums, and samples that include screaming guitars, subways, sirens. There are shouts on this LP, synthesizers, scratching, vinyl scratching. This album is just pure underground grime, plain and simple. But is the style or the sound of these songs progressive? Not really, in the sense that NASA is a flashy rapper. At least he doesn't come off as one on this record. He's no Exhibit or Eminem or Tech Nine or Busta Rhymes. But NASA's material is progressive in the sense that it is different and sort of experimental. Rhythmically, a lot of the beats on this LP are very loose. They don't feel quantized. They're not very tight. Just everything is very spaced out and just a little fluid. And NASA's flow is pretty much the same way. He seems to take away a lot from the rudimentary flows that a lot of rappers used to showcase in the 80s, the early 90s. Sometimes he's on tempo, sometimes he's off tempo. He kind of borders between rapping and really expressive spoken word a lot of the time. And he's rapping on top of these really oddly shaped instrumentals that have grooves in the background I don't think most rappers would even try to touch, like the songs Curmudgeon or Destiny, which had these really odd shuffling drum beats, or the excitingly noisy instrumental on Desperate Times, which I think there are very few MCs whose voices could really punch through everything that's going on in this beat. This instrumental sounds like it was pulled together using the steam coming out of a sewer that was in the middle of the most crime-ridden street in New York City in the early 90s. There's the song 574s, which maybe has the most disorienting synthesizer line on the entire LP. Like, weirder than a lot of stuff Death Grips has even done. There are some very tight and steady beats on this LP too that have a very dark edge to them, like this Bodega's Trying to Kill Me, or the title track on this record that kind of reminds me of old LP or old Def Jux or Company Flow records. I think NASA takes away a lot from MF Doom's Special Herb series as well, but just way weirder and more experimental. There are a few sad and very dreary beats as well in the track list here. There's a lot of variety across these instrumentals, and even though they are sort of hard to get into at first because of how muddy they are. They are very subtle, they are very layered, they're blood pumping, they're eerie, they're creative, and sometimes they're beautiful. What is clearer than the sound quality of these instrumentals are the concepts or the stories behind these songs. The song Feedback Loop is kind of a walk down memory lane with NASA, directly referencing 9/11 in the hook of this song, kind of marking that time as feeling long ago, along with 1999 saying, is this my memory or is this just my youth ending? The song 574s is another walk down memory lane, but this one sort of orienting itself a little bit more around shoes, specifically the 574 line of the New Balance brand. And along with this shoe, NASA drops some inspirational lyrics and talks about things like working at a temp job, which brought him to working at Wall Street at one point in time where he met mad jerks. This Bodega is Trying to Kill Me is maybe one of my favorite tracks on this entire LP. Features a killer verse from Elucid of Arm & Hammer. And it's essentially a song kind of talking about this bodega filled with either seedy characters or bad omens and really unsanitary food. There's Paranoia or Destruction, which hit me as being kind of one of the worst tracks on the LP at first, merely because of how the hook is. Paranoia's always there. Just the way that it's sung, it just feels very amateurish, but the more I listen to this LP, the more this hook really fit the aesthetic of the entire album. And I do really love the lyrics and the sentiment of the song, even though a lot of people, paranoia seems to torture them and eat away at them. And it seems to do that with Uncommon NASA too. He sees it also as a plus, something that continues to protect him deeper in his life. And the song Curmudgeon, which has the saddest beat on the entire LP, in my opinion, kind of follows in that same kind of cranky loner vibe where NASA is talking about not wanting to meet a whole lot of new people or form really strong relationships with really new people, because instead he prefers to maintain the relationships he has with a lot of the people who he knows already. He doesn't want to flood his life with people or just things that he feels are unnecessary. He only wants to carry what are his essentials. And then there's the title track to this LP, another song I love, and not really a track that has a story to it or anything, but a lot of phone imagery, a lot of phone folklore, as well as one of the best hooks on the entire LP. And this whole phone thing is an interesting concept that plays throughout this entire album, as Uncommon NASA presents this instrumental that samples a little bit of Frank Zappa off of the LP Hot Rats, and over these instrumentals it seems like he's putting vocal snippets of people talking, most of whom, if not all, seem to be related to this album in some way. And they're all talking about why they love, they left, or they live in New York. I think it's a nice segue from track to track. It adds a lot of character to the album. I think it pulls all the songs together. And the entire record, if you exclude the intro, is bookended with these two songs, which are maybe the most difficult to digest on the entire LP. Though I do think they do a great job of finishing things off with a really eerie feel, or setting the tone with something kind of lofty and ambitious and very abstract. You know, Uncommon NASA makes great hip-hop songs, but there's something about tracks like Destiny that are just really difficult to classify. And I really enjoy this track, and I think it's a great start to the record, even though it was a little off-putting at first. But the more that I listen to it and the more that I appreciate it, it seems like it's harder to put into words what it is about this track that makes it so great, because the off-kilter groove, the spacey flow, the really esoteric meaning of a lot of what Uncommon NASA is saying certainly makes it difficult to get into. To address some of the feature verses on this LP for a little bit, I do think the songs that have more guest rappers on them tend to be a little less conceptual. Unfortunately, I do think that is a little bit of a hindrance, though the guest verses are still good, like with The Stakes, which features Billy Woods. You may know him from Arm & Hammer and his solo stuff, and BMS, a rapper that I'm not really familiar with, though his flow and his delivery reminds me quite a bit of Guilty Simpson. And then there is Curly Castro and Prem Rock over the song Numb. Overall, I think this is a great record, one great track after another with an interesting theme and concept. Uncommon NASA writes some great hooks. There's some very good guest features. NASA picks and produces some wonderfully scuzzy beats. And even though I don't think NASA is the most technically proficient or technically entertaining rapper, he makes up for that a lot with his personality, his subject matters, his lyrics. He's definitely one of those artists that when it comes to lyrics, he's very much quality over quantity. He is concept over catchiness. There's some artists that can't really pull that dynamic off. There's some artists who can, and I think NASA is one who can. I'm feeling a strong 8 on this LP. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Uncommon NASA, forever.